commercial businesses. And his proposal is that we get out of that, and we do what most cities around the country do. We franchise commercial waste services. It means that we would set baseline criteria for performance, and we would issue licenses to commercial haulers to provide that service around the city. And that's estimated that it could generate about $900,000 in 2013 and $1.9 million annually after that. Now, for the big item that everybody, that is the hot topic of discussion, assuming that it's been perhaps a hot topic for discussion among your communities that you're associated with, that is the major revenue enhancement side of the manager's budget is the leasing of some parking garages and the on-street meters. And so the RFP was issued, and we have received 8 or 9 responses. I think it's 9 responses at this point from companies who want to actually partner with the city in doing this. And how it's structured. This is a very, very generalized structural scenario. I'm going to do it's much more complicated. Ultimately, how it's structured is that there must be a minimum lump sum payment of $40 million, and then an ongoing revenue stream that's shared between the vendor and the city. And the reason why it's very simple is that $40 million lump sum payment is not intended to say that that's the value of the garages or the on-street meters. Because part of the RFP is that one of the purposes of the RFP is to actually set the market value of that. And while I have not seen the responses, the actual value placed on the garages and the meters is much, 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 much higher than $40 million. Okay, but the assumption of the manager is that if the council approves and as the contract's negotiated, that the city will want to do certain things, perhaps, such as perhaps retain the right to actually approve rates, such as, perhaps exclude some meters for inclusion. So the assumption of the manager is that every time the city basically says, no, we would approve rates, no, we want this excluded, and there's a negotiation, that then the number comes down. Okay? So that's just part of the negotiating process. And that will obviously all come in front of council. The other thing to understand about this parking proposal is not every garage is included in this. This is not privatizing the city's entire parking system. This is important for you to understand. In fact, if that were the case, why would we have just spent $8.5 million to buy Tower Place and the Old Folks Garage, which are not part of this. Also, Washington Park is not part of this. Also, Fountain Square North is not part of this. We are not giving up our right to run parking. But what we are saying is there's a monetary value to some of our garages, which are in bad shape and need major repair. There's not necessarily strategic value to them at this point. There is strategic value to the city's ownership of other garages that can actually be used to support downtown redevelopment as well as redevelopment in other communities, and that we need to think about this much more, again, strategically, as opposed to just taking ideological positions either way that, no, we can't, use this asset as a way to support city's general revenue fund as well as the city's objectives in terms of redevelopment. So we can get more into that if you would like. The other thing that is also important to realize is that the manager basically is well aware of concerns around those folks currently employed within the parking division, and as part of the RFP and also as part of the agreement with the ASME, has said that those folks, Now, whatever vendor is chosen would have to actually give employees who are currently employed in the parking section an opportunity to apply. But if they chose not to do that, or if they were not hired, then they would be moved into other positions for the city so that people would not lose their jobs. The other area of the manager's projections that deals is a section which she calls embedded growth. Now, what is embedded growth? So what does that mean? It's like, well, what that means is that the strategy that the city and the administration has pursued for the last 6 years has been to invest in developments that will actually increase the revenue tax base of the city. Okay, so, and what does that mean? Well, it means, for example, you've heard of this before, the city officially adopted Plan Cincinnati as the city's economic development policy. Succinctly put, targets three key areas. Three key areas were determined by an analysis which asked for the investment of X amount of resources, what areas of the city actually would provide the greatest return on that investment to the city in the form of enhanced tax revenues. So those three areas, well, it's actually 6 areas, downtown, the uptown area, and over the Rhine. So that was the ROI analysis, plus then 3 other areas, Seymour Reading Road corridors, Madison Road, Red Bank, Queensgate, Lower Mill. Now, does that mean that no other place sees investment? No. But it does clearly delineate that if we want to actually see major growth, that those are the growth opportunities, and that those are the major areas where the city can experience significant increases in revenues as a result of investments. The new proposal on the table by the manager, and that's been in the paper, it has been discussed, is that's great. But how do we now also look at other communities that also need investment, and with very clear underwriting, apply the same sort of ROI to them? Which means, where do we have or where do we develop transformative projects in our neighborhoods and in our communities? And so, for example, and this is part of Go Cincinnati, but it is a very good example. Most of you are familiar with the old Swifton Commons, which is now called Jordan's Crossing, right? Well, in partnership with the Port Authority, the city is putting up $8.5 million for the Port Authority to buy and redevelop as a mixed-use, walkable, urban development, that 32-acre site, reconnecting it to the neighborhood, connecting it into the villages of Daybreak, and it is not some vision is simply not limited to that particular site, because anybody who has driven Reading Road and been at the intersection of Reading and Seymour know that at this point the only corner that has anything of any value on it is where the CPS built the new Woodward High School. And so the potential is for a major investment in that area, which would transform both the futures of Roselawn and Montauk, quite frankly, and change their trajectories, and that's one of the objectives. Another example of Fund 52 is, and it's something that you all have quite a reading about. You may be aware that Westwood, Walnut Hills, Madisonville, College Hill have all been engaged in long-term strategic planning and have developed form-based codes for their communities. We have a white form-based code which we'll be adopting, but they have actually, on a neighborhood level, engaged in neighborhood shreds for that. Well, they are all poised as a result of, over the last number of years, acquiring significant amounts of property that is under the community's control or is under the city's control in partnership with the community. They have aligned their community organizations, business associations, development corporations, and community councils. And they are already, in January, to for developers for the rebuilding of key places within their business districts as mixed-use residential, commercial, retail areas. And so this new fund, and those are just some examples, and so this new Fund 52